March 14, 1966. The Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. Showroom packed with 800 people. Dean Martin was halfway through Everybody Loves Somebody. The audience was mesmerized. The orchestra swelled behind him. The spotlight caught the smoke from 100 cigarettes hanging in the air. Everything was perfect. Then Dean stopped, mid-note. His voice just stopped. He stared at row 12. His face went pale. The microphone slipped from his hand and hit the stage floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent room. He walked off stage. Didn't say a word. Just left. For 18 years, nobody knew why. The truth only came out after someone found Dean's private journal in 1984. The audience sat in stunned silence. What just happened? Was Dean sick? Was he drunk? Had he forgotten the words? None of those things. What Dean Martin saw in row 12 that night was something that haunted him for nearly 2 decades. The Sands Hotel management was in chaos. Dean Martin had never done anything like this. He was a professional. He showed up. He made people laugh. He was the king of cool. The guy who never broke a sweat. The guy who made everything look easy. The guy who could drink all night and still hit every note. The guy who never let anyone see him sweat. But this night was different. Something had broken through that cool exterior. Something had reached past all the walls Dean had built around himself. Frank Sinatra, who was backstage waiting to go on for the second show, rushed out to see what was wrong. He found Dean in his dressing room, sitting, staring at nothing, the glass of whiskey on the table untouched, his bow tie loosened, his hands shaking, his face pale as death. "Dino, what happened? You okay?" Dean looked at Frank. His eyes were hollow, empty, like someone had reached inside and pulled something out. Like he'd seen something that nobody else could see. "I can't explain it, Pally. I can't." Frank tried to get more information. He'd known Dean for years. They'd sung together, drank together, raised hell together. If anyone could get Dean to talk, it was Frank. Frank had seen Dean at his worst, seen him drunk, seen him angry, seen him sad, but he'd never seen him like this, never seen him shaken. Dean Martin didn't get shaken, but Dean refused. He wouldn't say another word about it. He refused to go back on stage. He refused to finish the show. He canceled the rest of his shows that week. 7 sold-out performances. Gone, just like that. The Sands Hotel lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The fans were furious. The press went crazy. Headlines the next morning. D.E. Mughal case O.T. Wolf. Mam Wistar ILLSS Kang FGF KOL Kutnbef Diorano Giwake Rai Pan Sirasa Xus Degi and Rai Koma Badik and Marti Kola PSON Stedgel. But nobody had answers. Nobody knew what had really happened. The witnesses all said the same thing. Dean had been fine. Then he wasn't. He'd been singing. Then he stopped. He'd been looking at the audience. Then he went pale. He'd been Dean Martin. Then he was someone else. Someone scared. Someone hurt. Someone broken. Dean's management released a statement to the press by noon. Mr. Martin experienced a personal emergency. He apologizes to his fans and looks forward to returning to the stage soon. That was it. No details. No explanation. No follow-up. The press secretary wouldn't answer questions. The Sands Hotel wouldn't comment. Frank Sinatra wouldn't talk. Nobody would talk. People had theories. Oh, did they have theories? Someone threatened him. Maybe the mob. Maybe a jealous husband. Vegas was full of dangerous people. Maybe someone in the audience had a gun. Maybe someone had made a threat. Maybe Dean saw something that scared him. He had a heart attack scare. He was only 48, but the drinking, the smoking, the late nights, it catches up. Maybe his heart gave out for a second. Maybe he felt chest pain and got scared. Maybe the doctors told him to stop. He'd gotten terrible news about a family member, his son Craig maybe, or his ex-wife, or one of his kids. Something terrible, an accident, an illness, a death. Something so bad he couldn't finish the show. He was having a breakdown. The pressure of fame, the constant performing, the expectations, the traveling, the drinking, the women. The press. It finally got to him. Finally broke him. All wrong. Every single theory. Wrong. Years passed. The mystery deepened. 1967 came and went. 1968. 1960. Still no answer. Dean went back to performing a month later. Same venue. Same songs. Same cool demeanor. Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just walked off stage in the middle of a song. Like he hadn't just had a complete breakdown in front of 800 people. He was Dean Martin again. The king of cool. Perfect. But whenever journalists asked him about that night, and they did ask for years, he'd change the subject. Ancient history. Let's talk about something else. Or he'd make a joke. I forgot the words. Don't tell anyone. Then he'd laugh that famous Dean Martin laugh and move on. The conversation was over. Even his closest friends, Frank, Sammy, Joey Bishop, Peter Lawford, they didn't know. And these were guys who knew everything about each other, who'd seen each other at their worst, who'd covered for each other 1,000 times, who'd kept each other's secrets, who'd been through everything together. But this, Dan had locked it away, built a wall around it, put it somewhere nobody could reach, buried it so deep that even the people who loved him most couldn't find it. Whatever happened that night in March 1966, Dean Martin took it to his grave. Or so everyone thought. Now, you might think this is just another show business mystery. Celebrity has a moment, walks off stage, life goes on. Hollywood is full of stories like this. Stars who crack under pressure, stars who have breakdowns, stars who can't handle the fame. It happens all the time. But here's what makes this different. What Dean Martin saw in row 12 that night wasn't just startling. It wasn't just unexpected. It wasn't just shocking. It was a ghost from his past, a reminder of the worst moment of his life, a trauma he'd spent 17 years trying to forget, 17 years of building walls, 17 years of pretending he was fine, 17 years of being the king of cool who never let anything shake him, 17 years of drinking to forget, 7 years of working to avoid thinking about it, 17 years of moving forward without ever looking back. All of it destroyed in 1 second. One moment. One face in a crowd. And the woman sitting in row 12? She had no idea what she'd triggered. No idea that just by being there, just by turning her head at the exact moment, the spotlight swept across the audience. She'd opened a wound Dean had never healed. She was just a tourist from Boston. Just a woman who wanted to see a good show. Just someone on vacation with her husband. Just a normal person living a normal life. She had no connection to Dean Martin. Had never met him. Didn't know him. Didn't know anyone who knew him. Had never been to one of his shows before. Had never even been to Las Vegas before. She was nobody to him, a stranger, a face in a crowd. But for 1 second, she was everything. Dean Martin had faced down mob bosses in Vegas. Guys who could make you disappear with a phone call. Guys who ran the casinos. Guys who decided who worked and who didn't. Guys who could end your career with a word. He dealt with hecklers, with critics, with professional disasters, with bad reviews, with failed movies, with career slumps. He'd survived the end of his partnership with Jerry Lewis, breakup so bitter they didn't speak for 20 years. A breakup that the press called the biggest split in show business history. A breakup that people said would end both their careers. He'd navigated divorce, scandal, career setbacks. He'd been broke. He'd been everywhere in between. He'd seen it all. Done it all. Survived it all. But this was different. Because what Dean saw that night wasn't just a woman in row 12. It was the face of someone he'd lost. Someone he'd loved more than anyone. Someone he'd loved more than fame. More than money. More than success. More than anything. Someone whose death had broken him in ways he never talked about, never processed, never healed, never got over, and for 18 years, he kept that secret. Locked it away so tight that even the people closest to him had no idea. Buried it so deep that he almost forgot it himself. Almost. The woman in row 12 was named Catherine Walsh. She was from Boston, 34 years old, visiting Vegas with her husband for their anniversary, 10 years married, happy, stable, middle class. They'd saved up for months, got tickets to see Dean Martin as a treat. Her husband knew she loved Dean's music, loved his movies, thought he was charming, thought he was handsome, thought he was the coolest man alive. So he surprised her with the tickets. Front row seats, row 12, best seats in the house. She had no connection to Dean Martin's past, had never met him, didn't know anyone who knew him, had never been to Hollywood, had never worked in show business, had never even thought about show business except as entertainment. She was just a fan who wanted to see a good show, just a woman who wanted to have a nice night with her husband, just someone looking for a memory to take home. But Catherine Walsh looked exactly like Dan Martin's first wife, Elizabeth Ann MacDonald. Betty, who had died in 1949, 17 years before that night at the Sands, same dark hair, same delicate features, same way of tilting her head when she smiled, same eyes, same nose, same mouth, saying everything. It was uncanny, impossible. But there it was, and when the spotlight swept across the audience during Everybody Loves Somebody, when it caught Catherine Walsh in row 12, when she turned her head at exactly the wrong moment, Dunn saw Betty. For 1 second, Dean Martin saw his first wife, the woman he'd loved, the woman who'd believed in him when nobody else did, the woman who'd married him when he was nobody, the woman who'd stayed with him through the struggling years, the woman who'd given him a son, the woman who'd died at 28 years old. And everything stopped. The music kept playing, the orchestra kept going, the audience kept waiting. But for Dean, everything stopped. Time stopped. His heart stopped. His breath stopped. Everything. The Sands Hotel tried to find Catherine Walsh after that night. They wanted to know who she was. They thought maybe there was a connection they'd missed. Maybe she was related to someone in Dunn's past. Maybe she knew Betty's family. Maybe there was some explanation, some reason, some answer. They searched through the ticket records, found her name, found out she'd bought the tickets through a travel agency in Boston, called the agency, got her hotel information, called the hotel where she'd stayed. She'd already checked out, gone back to Boston, left the morning after the show. They tried to reach her there, called directory assistants, got a number, called it, no answer. Tried again the next day. Wrong number. The number had been disconnected. They tried to find her through other means. Nothing worked. She'd vanished. Like a ghost. Frank Sinatra hired a private investigator, paid him $5,000 to track down Catherine Walsh and find out who she was. The investigator spent 3 weeks on it, tracked her down to Boston, found her address, watched her for a few days, interviewed her neighbors, did background checks, came back with a report. Regular woman, regular life, married, no kids, worked as a librarian, husband was an accountant, lived in a small house in the suburbs, went to church on Sundays, had a book club, had a garden, lived a completely normal life. No connection to Dean Martin or anyone in his circle. No connection to Betty MacDonald. No connection to anyone in show business. No explanation for why she looked like Betty. Just one of those things. Genetics, coincidence, cruel luck. The investigator showed Frank a photograph he'd taken from a distance. Frank stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Jesus Christ, that's Betty." Sammy Davis Jar asked Dean about it one night in 1968. They were having drinks after a show, just the two of them, late night. The casino quiet, most of the tourists gone to bed, just them and the bartender. Sammy figured if he asked direct, Dean might finally talk. 2 years had passed, maybe enough time, maybe Dean was ready. Dino that night at the Sands, 2 years ago. What really happened? Dean looked at his drink, swirled the ice, watched the whiskey move in circles, said nothing. Sammy waited. Was it about Betty? Dean's jaw tightened. His hand gripped the glass harder, his eyes went dark. He stood up, walked out, didn't come back, didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. just left. Sammy never asked again. Nobody asked again. The message was clear. This was off limits. This was private. This was Dean's pain and Dean's alone. The 1970s came. Dean's career evolved. He got his own TV variety show. The Dean Martin Show became one of the biggest hits on television. Millions of people watched him every week, every Thursday night. Families gathered around their TVs to watch Dean sing and joke and make everything look easy. He seemed happy, relaxed, same old Dean. The casual charm, the effortless cool. The perfect timing. He was bigger than ever, more famous than ever, more successful than ever. He remarried, had more children, built a whole new life. A mansion, cars, money, everything a man could want. From the outside, everything was perfect. But the mystery never went away. Entertainment reporters still brought it up occasionally. Remember that night 1966 when Dean Martin walked off stage? They'd ask him about it in interviews, on talk shows, in magazine profiles, in newspaper features. Every few years, someone would bring it up. He'd shrug. I was sick. Came back, didn't I? But his eyes would go somewhere else when he said it. Somewhere far away. Somewhere nobody could follow. The 1980s arrived. Dunn was in his 60s now, still performing but slower, less frequent. The TV show had ended. The movies had stopped. He still did Vegas shows, still did concert tours, but less often, less energy. The spark was fading. People who knew him said he seemed tired, like he was carrying something heavy, like the weight was finally getting to him. Like all those years of pretending everything was fine were catching up. In 1984, something changed. Dean's daughter, Diana, was helping her father organize some old belongings. He was thinking about writing a memoir. Publishers were offering big money, 6 figures, 7 figures. Everyone wanted Dean Martin's story. The Rat Pack, the music, the women, the fame, all of it. But Dean wasn't sure he wanted to dredge up the past. Wasn't sure he wanted to relive everything. Wasn't sure he wanted to share it. In a locked drawer in his study, Dana found a leather journal, brown worn, the pages yellowed, the binding cracked. It looked old, forgotten. Dean had kept journals on and off for years, mostly for song ideas, show notes, things he wanted to remember, but this was different. This was from 1966, 1967. Just after that night, the dates on the inside cover confirmed it, March 1966 to March 1967, 1 year of his life. Locked away for nearly 2 decades, Diana asked if she could read it. Dean, now 67 years old, hesitated. His hand reached for the journal like he wanted to take it back, lock it away again, hide it, bury it deeper. Then he stopped. He looked at his daughter, saw the concern in her eyes, the love, the worry. She'd been asking him to talk about things for years, about his feelings, about his pain, about the things he kept locked inside. He'd always refused, always changed the subject, always moved on. But now, something was different. Maybe he was tired of carrying it alone. Maybe he was tired of pretending. Maybe he was just tired. He nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe it's time someone knew. Diana opened the journal carefully. The pages were fragile. The ink faded in places. Some pages were stuck together. Some were water damaged, like he'd cried while writing. Most of the entries were mundane. Show notes, song ideas, reminders about meetings. Nothing interesting. Nothing personal. Just business. Then she found the entry from March 15, 1966. The day after the incident. The handwriting was different, shaky, rushed, messy. Like he'd written it in the middle of the night when he couldn't sleep. Like his hands were shaking, like he could barely hold the pen. It read, "Last night I saw Elizabeth. I know it wasn't her. I know she's been gone 17 years. I know she's dead. I know she's never coming back. But for 1 second, when that woman turned her head and the light hit her face, I saw Betty. My Betty. And I couldn't breathe. I haven't thought about her like that in years. I've moved on. Remarried. Had more children. Built a whole life after her. I thought I was over it. I really did. I thought I'd healed. I thought I'd let go. But seeing that face, it all came back. The hospital, the phone call, the funeral I couldn't speak at, the way she looked in that coffin. Too young, too pale, too gone. The way her hand felt cold when I touched it. The way I couldn't believe she was really dead. The way I kept thinking she'd wake up, she'd open her eyes, she'd smile at me. But she didn't. She was gone, all of it. In 1 second, I had to leave. I couldn't finish the song. I couldn't stand there and sing about love while looking at her face. Even though I knew it wasn't her. Even though I knew I was being crazy. Even though I knew 800 people were watching. I couldn't pretend. For once in my life, I couldn't just keep going. Frank thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am. Sammy keeps asking if I'm okay. I'm not, but I can't explain it. How do you explain seeing a ghost? How do you explain that 17 years later, you're still not over it? How do you explain that you never really loved anyone else? Not really. Not like that. I thought really did. I thought I'd buried it. Moved on. Built a new life. But you don't bury that kind of love. It just waits. And last night, it found me. Diana read it with tears streaming down her face. She'd never known. Nobody had known. Her father had been carrying this for 18 years, carrying it alone, carrying it in silence, carrying it without help, without support, without anyone to talk to. She looked up at Dean. He was staring out the window, his shoulders tight, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "Dad," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "Why didn't you ever talk about this? Why carry it alone for so long?" Dean was quiet for a long time. So long that Donna thought he wasn't going to answer. So long she thought maybe he hadn't heard her. So long she started to wonder if she'd made a mistake by reading the journal. Then he spoke, his voice rough, tired, old, older than she'd ever heard it. "Because I thought if I talked about it, if I let it out, I wouldn't be able to stop. And I had to keep going. For you kids, for my career, for everyone counting on me, for everyone who needed me to be Don Martin, the king of cool, the guy who never breaks, the guy who's always fine. But you didn't have to carry it alone. I know that now. But back then, I didn't know any other way. That's what men did. You didn't cry, you didn't fall apart, you just kept going, you just buried it and moved on. And I was good at it. Really good. I buried it so deep I almost forgot it was there. Almost. Don Martin met Elizabeth Ann MacDonald in 1941. He was still Dino Crocetti then, struggling, still singing in small clubs for small money, still trying to figure out if he'd ever make it, still wondering if he should give up and go work in his father's barbershop, still broke, still known, still nobody. Betty was a secretary at a music publishing company in Cleveland. She came to see him sing one night because her boss thought Dino might have potential. Thought maybe the company should sign him. Thought maybe he had something. She stayed because she thought Dino had something special. Something beyond talent, something in his eyes, something in his voice, something real. She wasn't wrong. Betty was different from anyone he'd ever met. Smart, kind, practical, down to earth. She didn't care about fame or money. Didn't care about the glamour. Didn't care about the dream. She just believed in him when nobody else did. She saw something in him that he didn't see in himself. They got married in October 1941. He was 24. She was 21. They were broke, deliriously happy, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Living in a tiny apartment, eating cheap food, wearing old clothes. But they didn't care there. They had each other hope. They had love. They had a son, Craig, in 1942. For a while, everything was perfect. Dean's career was starting to take off slowly. He changed his name to Dean Martin, started getting better gigs, better money, better clubs, better audiences. People were starting to notice him, starting to talk about him, starting to think he might actually make it. Betty was proud of him. She'd sit in the audience every night, watching him, but cheering him on. She was his biggest fan, his only fan. Sometimes they were building a life, a real life, a good life. Then in 1949, something went wrong. Betty had been feeling tired, weak, run down. She thought it was just from taking care of Craig, from the long hours Dean was working, from the stress of trying to make ends meet, from not sleeping enough, from doing too much. It wasn't exhaustion, it was cancer, fast, unstoppable, merciless. The doctor said she had maybe 6 months, maybe, if she was lucky, if the treatment worked. If God was merciful, she had 3 months from diagnosis to death, 3 months of watching her fade, 3 months of helplessness, 3 months of praying for a miracle that never came. She died in August 1949. She was 28 years old. Den was 32, and he was destroyed, completely destroyed, shattered, broken, lost. Friends said he aged 10 years in those 3 months. He couldn't function, couldn't sing, couldn't work, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He'd sit in the dark and stare at nothing. Sit in Craig's room and watch him sleep. Sit at the kitchen table and stare at Betty's empty chair. People were worried he'd never recover, never come back, never be able to perform again, never be Dan Martin again. But Dean Martin didn't talk about it, didn't process it, didn't grieve properly, didn't see a therapist, didn't join a support group, didn't lean on friends. That wasn't how men did things in 1949. You didn't cry, you didn't fall apart. You didn't burden other people with your pain. You didn't show weakness. You just moved on, or tried to. He threw himself into work, into his new partnership with Jerry Lewis. They just started working together. The comedy act was taking off, getting attending bookings, getting laughs, getting money. Dean poured everything into it. Every ounce of energy, every bit of focus, every waking moment. If he worked hard enough, maybe he wouldn't have to think about Betty. Maybe he wouldn't have to feel the loss. Maybe he could outrun the grief. Maybe he could forget. It worked. Sort of. Den and Jerry became one of the biggest acts in America. Movies, TV, radio, sold-out shows, millions of dollars, millions of fans. They were everywhere, on every screen, in every newspaper, on every radio. Den remarried in 1949, just months after Betty died. Too fast, way too fast. Everyone said so, but he needed something to fill the void, needed to not be alone, needed to not think about Betty every second of every day. He had more children, built a massive career, became famous, became rich, became the king of cool, became an icon, became a legend, but he never healed. He just buried it. Buried it so deep he almost forgot it was there. For 17 years it stayed buried, locked away, out of sight, out of mind, almost. Until that night in March 1966. Until he saw a woman in row 12 who looked exactly like Betty, and everything came flooding back. All the pain he'd never processed, all the grief he'd never released, all the love he'd never said goodbye to, all the guilt he'd been carrying, all the what-ifs, all the regrets. It hit him all at once, in the middle of a song, in front of 800 people. And for the first time in his life, Dean Martin couldn't pretend everything was fine. After Deanna read the journal, she asked her father, "Did you ever try to find that woman, Catherine Walsh?" Dean shook his head. "No." "Why not?" "What would I say to her? Excuse me, you look like my dead wife, and it broke me. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just there, just living her life, just trying to have a nice night. I wasn't going to ruin that for her. But maybe talking to her would have helped. Maybe. But I wasn't ready. Hell, I'm still not ready." And she deserved to live her life without some washed-up singer telling her she looks like a ghost. Deanna closed the journal, held it in her lap, felt the weight of it, the weight of 18 years of silence. "You should write about this, in the memoir. People should know." Dean looked at her, surprised, confused. "Why?" "Because it's real. Because it's human. Because everyone thinks you're the king of cool who never feels anything. But you do feel. You feel everything. You just hide it. And people need to know that even Dean Martin gets broken sometimes. Even Dean Martin has pain. Even Dean Martin is human. Dean thought about that. Sat with it. Let it sink in. He didn't write the memoir. Not then. Not ever. He couldn't. Couldn't open those doors. Couldn't let people in that far. But he did talk to Diana about Betty. For the first time in decades, he talked about his first wife. About what she meant to him. About how much it hurt to lose her. About how he never got over it. Not really. Not ever. About how every woman he'd been with since had been compared to Betty. About how none of them measured up. About how he'd spent 40 years looking for something he'd lost in 1949. The story eventually got out slowly, quietly. A biography mentioned it in 1989. Dean Martin, the unauthorized biography, then Entertainment Weekly ran a piece in 1991. The night Dean Martin saw a ghost, People magazine picked it up, then Rolling Stone. Then it was everywhere. People were moved, not because Dean Martin walked off stage, but because even the king of cool, the guy who seemed unshakable, was carrying grief he'd never processed. The lesson isn't complicated. You can bury pain. You can hide trauma. You can pretend you're fine. You can build walls so high nobody can see what's behind them. You can smile when you want to cry. You can joke when you want to scream. You can perform when you want to collapse, but it doesn't go away. It waits. It sits there in the dark, waiting for a moment, a face, a song, a memory, a smell, anything. And sometimes, 17 years later, it sees a face in a crowd and everything stops. Dean Martin performed for another 25 years after that night. Thousands of shows, millions of people, billions of dollars. He was professional. He was punctual. He never walked off stage again. Never broke character. Never let anyone see behind the mask. But people who knew him said he was different after 1966. A little more careful. A little more guarded. A little more distant. Like he knew now that the past could reach out and grab him at any moment. Like he knew he wasn't as invincible as everyone thought. Like he knew the walls he'd built weren't as strong as they seemed. He died in 1995, Christmas Day, 78 years old. His last words, according to his nurse, were about Betty. "I'll see you soon, baby." So here's the question nobody asked in 1966. When Dean Martin walked off that stage, was he weak? Was he unprofessional? Was he having a breakdown? Was he losing his mind? Was he giving up? Or was he finally, for once in his life, being honest? Most people bury their pain. Most people pretend they're fine. Most people keep going even when something inside them is screaming to stop. Most people build walls. Most people hide. Most people fake it. Dean Martin did that for 17 years, and it worked. Until it didn't. Until a stranger's face reminded him that you can't outrun grief. You can only carry it or let it go. Dean Martin carried his grief from row 12 that night in 1966. But really he'd been carrying it since 1949, since the day Betty died. Since the moment he got the phone call from the hospital. Since the funeral where he couldn't speak. Since the day he buried his first love and pretended he'd be fine. And he carried it until he finally wrote it down in a journal and let his daughter read it 18 years later. That's not weakness. That's being human. The audience that night thought they were seeing a man fall apart. They weren't. They were seeing a man finally feel something he'd been running from for 17 years. They were seeing the moment when grief catches up. When the past becomes present. When you realize you never really moved on. You just learned to live with the weight. So here's the real question. What are you carrying that you haven't let out? What pain are you pretending doesn't exist? What grief are you running from? What loss have you buried so deep you think it's gone? What trauma are you hiding behind a smile? What hurt are you covering with success? What wound are you pretending has healed? Because eventually it catches up. Eventually, you see a face in row 12. Eventually, the spotlight hits at exactly the wrong angle. Eventually, something reminds you that you never really dealt with it. And you have to choose. Keep running. Keep pretending. Keep building walls. Keep hiding. Keep faking it. Keep carrying it alone. Or finally stop. Finally feel it. Finally let it out. Finally talk about it. Finally heal. Dean Martin stopped. What will you do?